With the good news first. Everybody is probably familiar with the NAEP, which is the National Assessment for Educational Progress, the federal government's test that's given across the country and usually considered, since it is across the nation, to be a better and fairer assessment than individual states' assessments, which vary all over the place. So in grade 4 on the NAEP, there has been some closing and narrowing of the achievement gap. So from 1996 to 2007, there were 73% of students below basic, and in 2007 that had dropped to 37. So from 73 to 37, and then the proficient and advanced went from 3 up to 15, and that was for blacks, and then for Latinos, it went from 61 to 31 down in below basic and up from 7 to 22 into improvement. But grade 8 reading, there was some narrowing for blacks, but less so for Latinos. There's some traction about narrowing the gap on the elementary and the middle school levels, but not true for high school. This is the bad news. The gaps have actually widened today than in 1990 for the upper grades. For the gap for 17-year-olds on the NAEP reading in 1990 was 21 scale points different than for white students. In 2004, that had risen to 29. The gap for 17-year-olds on the NAEP math went from 1990 20 points up to a gap of 28 points. So what exactly is that? When you look at it, you would say the Education Trust, which is a nonprofit out of Washington, D.C. that's very involved in achievement gap. And it's given us a lot of research in that area. About 4 years behind other young people. Indeed, 17-year-old African American and Latino students have skills in English and math and science that are equivalent to a 13-year-old white student. So when we compare the highest level of educational attainment, Hispanic and African Americans are more likely to drop out in every state. College matriculation rates for African American and Hispanic high schools, they're less enrolled in college, about half that of that whites are, and about half is likely to graduate. But when we look at Connecticut, which we can immediately zoom in on, we look at the NAEP in grade 4 in reading, and Connecticut in 2007 fares very well for white students. They're second in the country in reading grade 4. But for African American students, they are 22nd of the states. Latinos, Connecticut ranks 33rd in grade 4, but for low-income students, it ranks 43rd. For grade 8 in math, white students are 13, the 13th state in the rankings. African Americans 28th, and Latinos 41, and low income 42. There are only 43 states taking that test. They're second from the bottom, with Alabama being last. So they have, and that was at one time, they were second, and another time since then I think they've been the last, the widest achievement gap in the country. So it has the have and the have-nots is where it centers around. And 85% of minorities in Connecticut live in 6 communities. It's a very segregated state. And as such, you have concentrations of poverty. And then that compounds, so you have poorer communities trying to serve more poor students. And these gaps begin before children arrive in the classrooms. And our educational system is not organized to ameliorate the problem, but rather we're organized to exacerbate the problem. That's where our problem comes in and our contribution to this problem. So students who come to school with less get less in school. And our national inequities in state and local revenue. So, and the research On average, high poverty versus low poverty gap is, in terms of dollars, is 773 fewer dollars when you look at what per pupil, it goes per pupil, high poverty versus low poverty. But when you get to minority, when you look at race, high minority versus low minority gap in district, it's even wider. It's $1,122 less. So you see where it is a gap based on race and class. Those are the two areas of it. Schools add to this, and one way we add to this is that we reconcile ourselves to a perpetual loss. We look, oh, the parents are poor, oh, the kids are not motivated, oh, we don't get enough resource on it. So we accept the loss or the low achievement or dropout of our students as collateral damage. It's our attitude about it. That low performance of students is just natural. Research informs us that a challenging curriculum results in lower failure rates, even for the lowest achievers. Yet, our high schools persist in putting poor and minority and other low achievers in dead-end, low rigorous, boring, ticket-to-nowhere courses. I can remember I brought in this head of the, I think it's the University of Maryland's Honors College. He's a black man. His name is Robowski, and he was a child genius. And excelled in math, and I brought him in to talk to what was then an African-American forum. And one of the, and we had a number of students there, and I introduced him to talk about math because I talked about kids being in classes, math classes in our district at the time when I came there. They had Foundations of Math. And Foundations of Math was a survey kind of course, and they had Foundations of Math 1, and they had Foundations of Math 2, 3, and 4, so the kids did 4 years of math in high school but never got to algebra. Okay, and so I said that, like in my introduction to him, that Foundations of Math was a ticket to nowhere, and which was the title of a study done by Education Trust. And some student went back, a black student who was in the audience, went back to her class of Foundations of Math on that Monday, and she told the teacher that, you know, we all in a class, that's the ticket to nowhere. And whatever have you, and the teacher got very upset, went to the union. The union had this big meeting, and was highly upset that I had said that it was a ticket to nowhere. And my point was, and they said, you know, you said that, did you say that? Yes. And and they said, well, I said, what's your point? Is your child in Foundations of Math? No. Because it was the whole math department. Raise your hand how many of you have kids, because 80-some% of them don't work and live in New Britain. Come on. Is your child, any of your children been in Foundations of Math or anything similar? And they said no. Then I told them, well, we don't have a conversation here, because that same thing, because that's exactly what it is. What that teacher should have said, instead of being upset, was said to that child, you are in a class and you need to be getting into a higher math class and something, and here's how to get there. You know, but that did not happen. I could go on about the union stories, but that was in the past, and we no longer have any Foundation of Math classes in the district. And every kid starts with algebra as the minimum course. So, but here is an analysis that was done in 2005, where American Educational Trust did an analysis and went in and looked at transcripts in all of these different high schools. And here are some courses that are on these kids' transcripts. Algebra and art, pre-Spanish, exploring, principles of PE, teen living, food fundamentals, and winter activities. So we don't close the gap by putting kids in these dead-end courses. Schools and districts have to focus on what they can do and stop whining about what they can't do and what they can't control. The students are poor and they're underprepared, so get over it. You know, we're here to teach what comes in the door. There are 4 areas that are recommended through research that should be state policy options, which are strategies to alleviate the achievement gap on a state level. Because we need to be working in concert. And the 4 areas are early childhood care and evaluation, and education, excuse me. Improving teacher leadership quality, early intervention for college, and extra learning opportunities. And I'm going to talk a little bit about each one. In early childhood care and education, the research shows that children who face the following hardships in their first 5 years are more prone to developmental delays that can cause long-term deficits in school achievement. Number 1, lack of stable, consistent, and nurturing relationships with parents and caregivers. Many of our students are shunted between parents and homeless at lots of different times and very mobile and not a stable environment. Poor access to health care and proper nutrition that you also alluded to, and little or no exposure to age-appropriate learning activities. Clear evidence now links high-quality early childhood care and education to better health as well as emotional and cognitive development. All critical factors that determine a child's readiness to succeed in kindergarten, elementary, and beyond. Children's early learning experiences to help prepare more children to achieve in the K-12 system need the following types of activities: high-quality child care, professional development for caregivers, preschool programs, curriculum standards, health care and social services, wraparound programs, looking at the whole child, invested in it, and parent education. But you know, part of me can talk about all this, but in my heart, I truly do not believe that there is any real desire to close the achievement gap on the part of many people who have the power to act. I think it's politically incorrect to say anything else, but when you look at something as basic as early childhood care and you look at where the state of Connecticut is around early childhood for all kids, they are behind many, many states. And I still don't have it, and we're the second poorest school district in the state. And we can't afford it to have preschool for all of our kids. So the one thing that people shouldn't be arguing about bipartisan, and they really don't, is about the value of quality preschool, but yet they won't make universal preschool a fundamental funded state requirement that they fulfill. They keep throwing a little money, and that's the one thing they can do. And then work with us to start from there. But to put the whole burden on the school system when you haven't done your part, when you know what to do. The second and probably the biggest area that no question has the biggest area, despite lack of preschool, despite lack of all-day kindergarten, is what happens with teachers and leaders and the quality of that. That's the single greatest correlation to what improves. Is you could have many students never had parents who helped them learn. They could not. Many of their parents could not read, or they couldn't help them do their homework, or do their science projects for them, or take them to Kinko's and print out stuff and do research. But their kids were successful in school. They were successful for a lot of reasons. Parents expected them to go to school and behave and to learn, but also teachers expected all kids to learn and for every kid to learn to read. I can remember there being a little wild boy named Johnny when I was in elementary school, and I had a teacher named Mrs. Corolla. You could imagine kids call her Crayola. But Mrs. Corolla, and Mrs. Corolla was a woman that looked like, if you could draw a spinster image, her hair was into a bun in 5 different directions and some hanging out all over, big glasses that she kept on a chain, and she was always ready. But in Miss Corolla, she did not accept failure. And her whole point was, Johnny used, I don't know if Johnny was really crazy, just acted crazy. But the bottom line was, she would say to Johnny, you can act or you can be crazy, but you will read. You just be a crazy kid that knows how to read. And so she would not allow his histrionics, which were always over the top, to interfere with her expectation of what he was going to learn. So it took him longer, or he had to stay after school because he had wasted time, but she insisted that he learn. But when it comes to quality teachers and quality leaders, there's an inequitable distribution. So that one of the things with the race to the top and the school improvement Title I-G money coming out of the ARA grants is that we got to replace teachers, and they want us to replace the teachers and they want to replace the principals. I've never had a problem with that. But the problem is finding people to replace them that are equal or better. Because when you look at the research, and they said there's a shortage of administrators. There's not a shortage of people who are trained to be administrators. They have the right certification. But 85% of those trained don't want to be administrators, and they don't want to work in urban districts. And that applies to teachers also. And then you get those who do work in urban districts who think that it's a welfare system for them, because you should just supposed to be happy that they're working in an urban district. And therefore you should expect less. The work is harder. It is emotionally more draining and physically harder to work in an urban district. No question about it. But when you accept that job, you accept those responsibilities and those conditions. And that is what you need to bring to the table. In schools with more than 90% minority enrollments, there is a less than a 50% chance that students will have a math or science teacher with both a teaching license and a degree or to teach that subject. So in my district last year, I thought it would be interesting to see. We accept blindly that if someone is certified by the state, that in fact means that they're qualified. And I tend to take exception to that. I think it does for some, but I think people really get qualified pretty much on their own motivation, because you have to go beyond what somebody else gives you as the minimum requirement. And that's a continuous improvement value that you bring to yourself. So I know that a lot of you are teachers, but I won an arbitration award many years ago that made a big difference, which was that I terminated teachers who were, these were tenured teachers, but when I had a layoff, I laid off by qualification, not seniority. So that I had some, like say for example, a teacher who was there 15 years, one was there 10, one was there 5. The 5 I kept and let the 2, 10, and the 15 go. And of course we went to court, and I won because I had set a policy and procedure in the district around qualified being a higher standard than certified. And therefore, and it wasn't put in place just for that when we got to the layoffs, to do the layoff. It was a part of my belief that different people bring different things to the table, and it's not just based on experience. So when you look at experience, you want to go beyond that. So that set the standard for that. And also when we created smaller learning communities, I actually had done that prior to the qualifier, which I also had to go to court about. I required the teachers to be interviewed, that they be interviewed for going to, if they wanted to go into a smaller learning. They couldn't post in there and get the job by seniority, because I thought it was a battle to fight to the deaths, because it was at the center of, you would never know if you had people who went in there and didn't have the skills, if it was what you was creating was successful because it was a wrong premise or a wrong theory of action, or if in fact the teacher was poor. You would not know where the failure lay. So if you know you have good teachers and it's not successful, you know something's wrong with what you're trying to do, and it needs to be fixed. Because you know these people are going to give it everything they got. Not a person who's saying, I'm 2 months away from being put on the improvement plan, let me transfer to another school because this teacher, this principal I can't handle because she actually expects me to do something in that classroom. So having won the right to interview and all of that stuff, that also put a dent into the seniority piece. And it wasn't that I was an anti-teacher, because these are all teachers. It's just that I wanted, for when I create something, I want the best because I want it to work. And it has never failed. Nothing that we've created where we've interviewed teachers and the teachers were selected. Everything is highly successful. Everything. So having done all of that, it was sending the message to people, which I have been trying to say. You need to be about continuous improvement. It ought not to be what we do only as PD. It ought to also be what do you want to be and to grow and do, because we can't PD you for everything you need to know and do it together. You know, we don't have that kind of time and those resources. You have to be able to do some on your own. And then when it gets down to layoffs and cuts, then everybody wants to say, well, I've been here 6 months more than she has. It should be my job. And my point is, well, what have you done? And I don't really, and I never looked at test scores. Never once in this regard. It was looking at how people approached their job, how they went about doing it, certainly attendance, certainly tardiness, but how they participate on teams. What do they sign up for when they have a choice to go into PD? Is everything just done what they're required? Where do they show leadership and professionalism? And so those made a difference. So yes, I think certification and licensure make a difference and experience, but subject matter knowledge. So last year, for example, I said we have in middle school, which I think was our worst performing area, we have teachers teaching math, okay, but teachers can teach math in middle school, and there were like 5 different certifications that they had, because you can have K-6, you can have middle school, you can have a high school certification in math, and I wanted to see, did it make a difference by certification if the teachers taught math, if those students did better, meaning that one certification was a better math preparation. You certainly thought, you would think so. But in addition, I wanted to see where teachers were on the math that we actually test kids on for the CMT. And because I thought, what if they don't even know the math? But we assume they do because they're certified. But you know, experience is a great teacher, because I was an adjunct professor in Wisconsin, and I had a cohort of teachers working on a master's in teaching, and they had, I had these teachers for a year and a half, and I was their only professor, and we got to be very, very close. And I used to listen to them talk, and some of them were in my district, and they were talking about, oh my God, I got to teach 7th grade math, I hate math, I'm not any good at math, I had to study last night, and they're one chapter ahead of the students. Okay, and it wasn't their fault, you see, because somebody just looked and said they were middle school certified, let's put them in math, because we got a class to cover. So it was expedient. So I thought, well, maybe that's in New Britain too, because we suck in math, so that might be, you know, a part of it. You know, you don't leave any stone unturned. So I had our math department chairs, who were by this time new ones, because the rest of them retired after I made algebra, the baseline course. Actually, I did. I had 7 math teachers retire that year, and I was thankful for every one of them. So I got 2 men in there who were phenomenal, and I said, can you devise and work with my math coordinator, who's phenomenal, and a test based on the CMTs for at that grade level of math that they would be teaching, a test so I could just see if the teachers had baseline knowledge, and I would be able to see what PD we would need to do. Well, when we did that, we had some teachers that got all of it right. And we had some teachers that we did it just like we do the thing. You either proficient, below proficient, advanced. The below proficient, we had too many, but some of them were close to proficient. But then there was a couple of them that were so low, it was frightening. So I had said that the intent was to take the teachers with their scores who were a little below, who we thought were teachable. They had a decent enough knowledge that we could work with them PD. But we designed their PD individually per teacher. What they needed. So someone needed to work in this area, that's what they got a PD in. Some needed to work in that one, and we could do it different ways. We paid for online classes if they wanted that. We ran PDs ourselves with the high school math people, and we did whatever. And we aligned their certifications with their the test scores of them and with their students. But a couple of the teachers, my point was, you would never teach math in this district. You know, you are just so low, we could not spend enough time in PD, nor would we on reaching you. And therefore, you have to be reassigned to teach something else or do something else, but you cannot teach math. So then we went down, and after the fervor over that, because I thought, once you got hell going on, why not just go for it all? Then I moved it down to the elementary teachers and tested all of them. And of course they said, oh, this is embarrassing. We shouldn't have to take a test, and we shouldn't have to sit there and we're tired and we got to take an hour test. But kids take CMTs. Kids go to classes all day long. You mean to tell me you can't take an hour test? So it's all smoke screens, didn't matter. So we went down to and tested all the elementary teachers in math, because as you would know, that's the same thing as reading. That many elementary teachers, given the 21st century demands, are not strong in two disciplines. And they would be happier, and we would be happier, if they taught to their strengths, which is what they should be doing. Because times have changed. Nobody expected kids to learn the level of math that they did, and they never expected all the kids to learn it. So, and I also, when you come to find out, a lot of our teachers can get certified in the state of Connecticut. I think they've changed it. I don't know if it's gone into effect, but I know I certainly would say that often. When they could get certified at elementary, but only have 2 reading classes. But yet their primary job is to teach reading. And some, they actually could get certified with 1. But many had 2, depending on what college they went to. So I felt that was something that needed to be addressed. So I think we were expecting people to do things that they could not do. Here's a key thing, a fact about evaluations. So if we talk about the quality of teacher being so important, let's look at the evaluation. From 03-04 school year to 07-08 school year, looking at Denver. Denver had 2,676 teacher evaluations that were satisfactory, and 22 that were unsatisfactory, less than 1%. Pueblo, Colorado had 1,284 satisfactory ratings, only 2 unsatisfactory ratings. Toledo had 1,768 satisfactory ratings, only 3 unsatisfactory ratings. It's a recipe for mediocrity and disaster in that. The third area, early intervention in college preparation. Wide disparities, is socioeconomic, ethnic, and race go to college. I'll move this along. And then we need to help more students be prepared and access college, and I think that everybody is moving toward that. But even when they start with high dropout rates, high impact, high performing schools still focus on preparing all kids for college and career. So such states as Texas, Indiana, Arkansas, Michigan, Oklahoma, South Dakota, and New York, college prep is the default curriculum in the state. So they do not have any foundations of math and are not permitted. After school programs and extra learning opportunities, they call them ELOs, are very, very necessary to help students overcome odds. So some of the common characteristics of high achieving schools: there's a focus on academic achievement, clear curriculum choices, frequent assessment of student progress, and multiple opportunities for improvement in real time. An emphasis on nonfiction writing, collaborative scoring, and student work. I just came from a week in Tampa, poor me. And And it was about college and career readiness. It was a leadership colloquium for College Board puts on and it was about college and career readiness. And where a lot of the things that I'm talking about was validated. High-performing schools have clear and specific goals for what students should learn in every grade, including the order in which they should learn it. Provide teachers with common curriculum and assignments. Have regular vehicles to assure common marking standards. Assess students every 4 to 8 weeks to measure progress and act immediately on those results. Teachers regularly observe other teachers. Teachers have time to plan and work collaboratively. New teachers get generous and careful support and acculturation. Teachers take on many other leadership tasks in the school. I think, and I'm closing here, you need to create a culture that all of this can exist in. If you do not have that culture, you are not going to maximize your opportunities. So you change behaviors before you can change attitudes or beliefs. And once you change behaviors and you have some success, you can bring along beliefs. But I think your culture should be that every educator, every person who works in a school district should say that failure is not an option, not in our house and not on my watch. I think that in those two cases, if every person took that attitude, we could have so much better success. If we believe that all students have a right to learn at high levels, and if we have high collective efficacy, where the building has that sense of that we can do this. If you have constant pointing out deficits and people, what I term, come from the basement people in your building. I'm returning around 2 schools. I'm sure they did a whole lot more talking while I was gone, but in order to qualify for SIG money, so Reggie up there, you're smiling because you know we have the same things. I'm turning around 2 schools, and the model I chose was I dismissed the 2 principals in order to get the money, and 50% of the staff. And my whole point in talking to the teachers of those staffs and to the union leadership, when we interview and rehire 50% of them back, and the other 50 have to go somewhere else, I'm going to be looking for attitude. Because see, I don't have to try to change attitude when you're hiring from scratch. I want those who already have that attitude, who realize it's hard, but who believe that we can do it. And if we do this, if we do that, and a collective efficacy around it. And if we set high goals for both the student learning and for adult learning. So yes, there's an achievement gap, but demographic characteristics are not destiny. And if every educator commits in your heart and in your soul to ensuring that failure is not an option, not any child, not in my house, and not on my watch, only then will all the children be well and the gap be closed. Thank you.